Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are finally seeing a change this weekend. We still have high pressure involved, but we are going to start to see some colder and some drier air mass starting to move in, which does mean we'll get rid of all this miserable gloom and we'll start to see a bit of sunshine. In those transitions there could be a bit of precipitation around as well, but we're not expecting anything too heavy at this stage. As we head into the longer range though, towards sort of the end of next week into the following week, things could turn cold or very cold. And today we've got some intriguing runs once again to look at. The GFS is probably showing the coldest November run I have ever seen. Again, I've been following these charts for a good 5 years now in detail, and even to a certain extent before that, and I've never seen a chart showing something so cold for November. Now, of course, you go back to 2010, we saw very cold conditions during November, but that was really only into the last few days of November, whereas this is showing exceptionally cold conditions around the 20th of November or so, with snow as well. The GM is a little bit more pessimistic, just potentially not getting that blocking as far northwards, and the ECMWF is once again very cold, just like it was last night. And of course the ensembles are still a little bit all over the place, but they are in agreement of at least below average conditions and colder conditions from the majority of ensemble runs for the rest of the month. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in description. Now if you start on the live radar, you can see at the moment it is reasonably dry, but it's another one of those miserable cloudy days and a bit of drizzle across the east coast. This will all be changing though over the next 24 to 48 hours, starting in the north and west, transitioning southwards and eastwards with a weather front that is moving through. It will bring a little bit of drizzle and more lighter rain, but once it clears we will see dry conditions, and definitely looks like on Monday we'll see some quite widespread sunshine. Now do look at the temperatures this afternoon. It is actually pretty chilly. We're not seeing much of a diurnal range at the moment because all of this cloud is just trapping the temperatures at the surface, not really moving all too much. So it's about 9 or 10 degrees overnight, and it's about 9 or 10 degrees during the day. Now further westwards we've got a bit more movement. There's a little bit more in the way of that air circulating, and this is why it is a little bit milder, because the air mass is actually coming up from the south. It's just because inland across much of England, Wales and Scotland, we're not seeing much movement in that air. It stagnates and cools down because of the longer nights, and it means that at the moment, although the upper air temperatures are actually very mild, they're a good few degrees above average, at the surface we're still pretty chilly. Now, if you go over to UKV and see what's going to happen over the next 5 days, it's the first time in quite a while that we've actually got quite a big change on this UKV. The past week or so, it's pretty much shown the same conditions, but finally we are seeing that change. As we head through the rest of Saturday, a few breaks in the cloud at times, but you can see a little bit more in the way of some persistent rain during Sunday. But this is bringing in this drier and colder air, and you can see that with some sunshine in northern and western areas during Sunday, and that sunshine becoming more widespread into Monday. There still could be cloud and high level cloud especially around, but it's a much sunnier picture through Monday, and again a lot more pleasant. Into Tuesday, a bit of rain in the far southeast. We start to push in a bit of an easterly flow. It's going to be potentially a little bit colder, but of course more sunshine around quite widely. And then finally into Wednesday and Thursday, a bit more gloom pushing back in as we see some weather fronts. But again, you can see there are plenty of drier slots, sunnier slots around. So it's not going to be all to all sunshine, but there is going to be a lot more sunshine around as we do see these transitioning air masses bringing in those sunnier conditions. And of course, you can start to see a bit of a change. Those wind directions are veering more from the north or east, and that is setting the precedent for what could be happening into the second half of the month. Now do look at the surface temperatures. You can see during Saturday, not particularly warm at all, maybe only 6 to 10 degrees for inland areas. Further westwards, as we saw from the live radar a minute ago, maybe 15 or 16 degrees. As we head into Sunday, it's a similar picture in the east where it's still a bit cloudy and cool, 8 or 9 degrees, further westwards towards the mid-teens. As we head into Monday, again a little bit chillier, but you can see it's more towards 9 to 11. It is a colder air mass, so it might feel a little bit chillier, a bit more of a brisker wind, but sunshine around, so actually I would prefer these sort of conditions. Into Tuesday, potentially a cold night, maybe frost developing, and that's what happens with these colder, clearer nights. And you can see into the afternoon, once again, very similar, 10 to 11 degrees. And by Wednesday, a very similar picture. So it does look like as we head into next week, it's going to be around average or maybe slightly below average in terms of the daytime temperatures, around the high single digits for most, and then overnight dropping towards the mid to low single digits, maybe a few frosts. But of course, the air masses we're seeing in the next sort of 5 days or so, nothing compared to what we could see as we head towards the end of next week into the following week. Now, if we do go over to the GFS to have a look at that exceptional run, it is the 6 o'clock run from the GFS today, and you can see high pressure in control at the moment. We couldn't be further away, from anything cold with the southerly wind developing. But things quickly change next week with that high pressure moving westwards and low pressure starting to move into Scandinavia. That's going to be our source of colder air. It's this big pool of tropospheric polar vortex that is shifting eastwards. This is where we're going to get our cold air from, and it's this block that's been moving in over the next couple of days, replacing the gloomy high pressure we've had over the past week. That is going to be moving westwards. Eventually, that high pressure late next week moves westwards, and we start open to the door to northerly winds. Nothing exceptional yet, but the synoptics are definitely on board for something extreme into the second half of November. As you can see, it's that tropospheric polar vortex towards the northeast. That, as I said, is going to be our source of cold. And look to our north, bitterly cold air heading our way, and we are tapping in directly into Arctic air. The -5 isotherm coming in for all, maybe even the -10 isotherm coming in for all, and it sustains for a long period of time before eventually getting slowly swept away into the final few images here are from the chart, but again it shows a good week or so of exceptionally cold conditions, the coldest run I've ever seen for this time during November, and you can see that from the ensembles here, around 10 to 12, maybe even lower than that, below average, with the air moving in here during this run. Exceptionally cold conditions, I can't stress that enough. This sort of chart in December, or even 10 days later than this, towards the last couple of days of November, it will still be very cold, but I wouldn't say it is exceptional. But showing this sort of air mass around the 15th, 16th, 17th of November is pretty ridiculous. But yeah, the coldest charts I've ever seen for the middle of November. And again, I've been looking at these runs in detail for the past 5 years or so, and even longer than that, looking more sporadically. So yeah, really, really exceptional conditions, and eventually does peter out towards the end of the run. Now, towards the surface, that's what everyone will be asking about. What will the conditions be? Now, again, there's no real point looking at this in depth, but I do just want to hint and give a bit of a flavour of what we could be seeing. As that cold air starts to move in around that daytime period, you see daytime temperatures during midday will be 2 to 4 degrees at best, and will slowly get colder than that. Here, 19th, 1 or 2 inland, overnight well below freezing, and again, during the afternoon, we're looking at best 1, 2, 3 degrees. Again, towards coastal areas with still some milder sea surface temperatures, it might still hold those temperatures above freezing. But inland, we are looking widely below freezing. And look at this, 21st of November, an ice day for much of inland Britain, 0 degrees for many, and overnight bitterly cold. And again, the following day, the 22nd, another ice day from this run. And again, the following day, another ice day for many inland areas, and we would expect to be seeing quite a lot of snow as well. Again, no point looking at this in depth, but just shows you that snow would be falling from the north of Scotland towards the south of England, showing you all areas would be within a cold enough air mass for settling snow. So yeah, a pretty exceptional run again today from the GFS. It was a little bit less exceptional last night in the video, but once again today it is exceptional, and I said the coldest run I've ever seen for this point in November. Now the GEM is very pessimistic compared to that. It's not especially unrealistic. The GEM could equally happen, which is where we do get that blocking northwards, but it doesn't quite sustain enough to build northerly winds. You can see it's very similar out towards sort of day 5 and towards day 7, but it's in the subsequent days where we start to show a northerly flow, but that block never gets going towards Greenland, and instead the high pressure topples and sits over the top of us, still trying to penetrate there towards Arctic and Greenland in general, but not fully coming off. So the GEM hints at it, and you can see here, especially sort of day 8, day 9, is trying to push a northerly flow in, but never fully gets there, unfortunately. So GEM on the opposite end of the spectrum, very close to developing something cold, but not pulling it off at all. And we actually don't see anything remarkable at all, just generally average, with eventually high pressure toppling over. Now the ECMWF is kind of in the middle. It's nothing exceptional, nothing ridiculous like that GFS run. It's not as intense and it's not as long lasting, but it is still very cold and would be wintry. Now you can see high pressure building in, very similar to the other runs. It moves westwards and eventually we do pull in a northerly wind. It's a little bit more of a northwesterly initially, so taking slightly longer sea track, and towards day 10 we do see low pressure develop within this, but because of the time of year being still in November, there is likely to be a milder slot, and you can see that here towards southern areas. A milder slot gets pulled into the low, exacerbating the precipitation, so it would cause a lot of significant snow in the north, but further southwards it would be milder. And you can see that if we put on those 2 meter temperatures, probably mid to high single digits further southwards, and you can see around freezing further northwards. So there you can see we would see significant snow, whereas the south would more likely be rain. So you can see here the ECMWF is cold again, northerly winds pushing in, the -5 isotherm coming in for all, but it would have a little bit of a caveat there with this small low developing, and it would potentially bring in some rain and at least some temporary milder conditions. Once it does pull through at day 10 though, we are likely to go back into a northerly flow, and that block is still there towards Greenland, so I wouldn't be surprised if all this air further northwards came streaming in the subsequent days, but it just shows you towards day 10 a little bit of a caveat there. Still cold, still potentially wintry for some, just not quite as ridiculous as the GFS. Now, if you look at the ensembles now, the latest GFS here, you can see generally average to below average for the foreseeable future. Maybe not as much below average as we saw from the ensembles yesterday, but we are expecting a bit of oscillating. You can see the operational run there is very cold. It's one of the coldest runs, that thicker green line, but by no means is it an outlier. It's just on the lower end of the ensemble suite, which means that it is a realistic option. Not definitely going to happen, but a realistic option down towards that -5 to -10 position, and you see, as I said, most of 0 or below that, so colder Arctic air. Dew points hovering around the low single digits, especially towards freezing, towards the second half of the month. Again, that is symbolic of cold Arctic air, and of course you need that dew point at 0 or preferably below 0 to see wintry precipitation. And again, if we look at the 2 meter temperatures, you can see a steady decline towards some very cold runs, especially operational run there being very cold. Again, the operational run looks like a bit of an outlier there because it is a slightly higher resolution, so it does pick up on those temperatures a little bit better than the ensembles. I have said that in the last few videos. The ensemble 2 meter temperatures not to be taken literally, it's more looking at the trends, and you can see a big drop here from 10 to 12 degrees down towards sort of 6 or 7. But again, I wouldn't look at those numbers literally. I just say there looks like to be around a 5 or 6 degree drop, which is fairly realistic. And I say that's because they are run at a lower resolution, so they don't pick up on those temperatures and sort of the variations and the sort of microclimate conditions that do come into it too much. So that means it is difficult to pinpoint those temperatures beyond sort of 3 or 4 days, and that's why I wouldn't look at them too literally. But following the trends, definitely a colder trend here from these charts. And if we finish by looking at the ECMWF ensembles, broadly very similar, a little bit more average or above average this week, so perhaps not as much of an easterly flow as the GFS was showing, but it's really that sort of 15th, 16th of November onwards where we've got interest for properly cold conditions, and you can see very similar to the other runs, average to well below average, and you can see some quite considerably cold runs like the operational run there, bit of an uptick at the end, but that's that milder sector moving through that we highlighted. You can see though it is cold. You see the control run, which is the blue line, is very cold as well, and you can see the majority of ensemble members are between that 0 and -5 point, with quite a few -5 or lower, And that is the threshold for properly cold conditions, i.e. low single digits during the day and wintry potential. So you can see again, all runs still on board with this sort of pattern. It is going to be very up and down over the coming days. I'm expecting runs to completely demolish any chances of colder conditions, and I'm expecting more similar runs to the GFS, maybe not quite as extreme, where we do go full-blown blocked and wintry. Very intriguing second half of November coming in. Could it set the precedent for the early part of the winter? I am going to be intrigued. We do put a winter update out in the next sort of few days. Hopefully this upcoming week will have a winter update. And again, I'll be intrigued to see what that shows as we've got the latest November data. And of course, we'll have a look at some of the weekly data as well. And then our last winter update about 10 days ago, we did see potentially some North Atlantic blocking. And that is what is appearing in the models now. So again, I'll be intrigued to see what the update from the ECMWF is, so do watch out for that in the coming days. But for the time being, the next sort of 5 to 7 days, more changeable conditions, slightly chillier, but hopefully some more sunshine, and then it could turn a little bit more interesting into the second half of the month. Maybe wintry, maybe very cold, but still all up in the air. Just got very strong signal at this stage, but until it gets in that day 7 time frame, we're not going to be calling it or saying it's guaranteed at all. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.